Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Sarah's here today.
Hi. Good morning.
I promised I would bring her back for our season closer, and almost didn't because Sarah's got COVID in her house now, which I had in my house last week. Somehow miraculously, I didn't get it again, but my husband had it last week. And then was it yesterday, Sarah, that your kid tested positive? Or
they flew to the kids flew to their uncles. My brothers had an amazing time in Edmonton and brought COVID back.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Yay.
Yeah. Anyways, so we weren't sure if Sarah was going to make it because we thought she might be up all night with a sick kid, but it turned out she wasn't up all night and she's here. So yay. So we had a bunch of little things. This is kind of like a kitchen sink podcast episode. We just wanted to wrap up this season. And, Sarah started this season with me. She started last season with me. And I think it makes sense to always have her on the season closer. So, just a bunch of little topics that we wanted to talk about. But I thought we'd start with talking about some of our favorite episodes from this season, because it's been a really great season. I feel like I got my legs under me this year as a podcast host. I got a better sense of the types of topics I wanted to talk about and what people were interested in. And we ended up getting some really great guests. And I think we were talking before we hit record here, and one of our collective favorites was Dr. Lori Brotto, who came and talked about women's desire. And I sent Sarah a post last week because Dr. Brotto was on Glennon Doyle's podcast last week. And I was like, we got her first, and sent it to Sarah. That's really funny.
I know. Politics and drama in the podcast world.
I know. It's like she's copying us, our BFF Glennon.
Well, yeah, obviously she listened to our podcast and thought, wow, that'd be a great idea.
Yeah, obviously she did. Yeah. So that was a really great episode if you haven't listened to that one yet, because we talked about the difference between spontaneous and responsive desire, which is something that's stuck in my head since we had that conversation with her. And I've talked to so many of my clients about that concept, because I think it's really freeing for women to realize that they're probably not going to be feeling that spontaneous desire very often anymore, because that spontaneous desire is just rare. It's rare, period, I think, but it's definitely rare in midlife. And that's because we don't have, raging hormones, I think, pushing us to procreate. But that doesn't mean that we can't feel desire. And I think that the explanation of what responsive desire is really helpful for me. It's been helpful for a lot of the women I've talked to. And I know for you, Sarah, you kind of felt the same way about that. What were your thoughts on that episode?
Yeah, I thought that it was something that I'd been trying to articulate and practice for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I used to always say, I think you've heard me say, you have to have your ducks in a row. You've got to, don't have a good book on the go. You got to have connection with your partner. You have to actually, I never used to say you have to plan it, although that was an interesting thing that she talked about. It's like all of the other important things in your life you plan. And yet we have this misguided notion that desire and intimacy in that way should be just happen.
Right.
And in order to have that for midlife women, you have to override. In order for that to be spontaneous, you would have to override so many other factors, including exhaustion and overwhelm and, just the to-do list and all those things. And so to actually plan it and intentionally kind of I also like the idea that when she talked about really kind of working up to it, it's like if you know that you're having a date with your partner, then to get the flirty on, mm-hmm. to kind of really know that that's happening and also ask for that from the person that you're with. And, mm-hmm.
And we also talked about, remember, we talked about that idea of like, not only that piece of it, but the other piece of it, which I think is really important for a lot of women, is to make sure that all the things that might interfere with you feeling desire have been considered and somehow dealt with. And that doesn't mean like you get everything on your to-do list done. It means you recognize that there are these things that could be a distraction for you, and you figure out a way to put them away for the time being, so that you're not, distracted by the pile of laundry in the corner, or, the fact that you need to pick someone up in 2.5 hours and you don't really want to make the drive. Like, and I think that was when we were talking about that idea of, some visualization and how it can be really helpful to just write the things down on a list and put the list away in a drawer, or, mentally visualize yourself taking whatever the thing is that you're worrying about, putting it in a locker, locking it up, and putting the key, somewhere safe, so that you can go back to it and kind of schedule or plan the time for that worrying and take it out of the present moment, so you can actually be present. And that was the other thing she talked about that was really cool. The studies that she's done and the research around the role of mindfulness in desire for women, and how that can actually lead to an increase in desire, getting more mindful, which makes perfect sense, because of course you're training your brain to just be where it is right then. And that just seems so obvious to me that would be a big factor in how that experience goes for us as women, whether we're present or not. So that was definitely one of our favorites, our mutual favorites. I think my favorites, I have three. I have one that was just my favorite conversation with you, which was the No More Fucks to Give episode, which I think was probably our most popular episode. I think it is our most popular episode for sure. If you haven't listened to that one yet, that is definitely one to go and listen to. I think that one resonated with pretty much everyone who listened to the podcast. And we just had such a fun conversation about that topic. That is actually quite a serious topic, but quite important, I think. So that was my favorite, I think, conversation with you so far. And then my favorite, like, surprise conversation or guest, like somebody who just surprised me at how interesting and just engaging the conversation and the topic was Dr. Scott. So I had Dr. Carol Scott on. I don't know if you listened to that episode, but we talked about, she just has a really great way of explaining how adverse childhood experiences, but also just like the way we're raised, even if the things that happen to us don't fall into the category of obvious childhood trauma. She kind of talked through how we have these various stages of development as children, and how most of us are missing something in one of those areas. Not because our parents aren't good parents, but because, like, parenting is hard and life happens. And so we are all shaped by the experiences of those first 7 years. And then she talked about how our experiences in those years can lead to be directly connected to women's burnout later on in life. And it was just a fascinating conversation. And, I knew it was going to be good because I did the pre-interview with her, and I thought her theory was really interesting, but it ended up being like one of my surprise favorites from this season. So that's Dr. Carol Scott's episode. And then, I really loved talking to Casey Davidson, which was a recent episode that I did. And Casey is the host of the podcast, Hello Someday. And we have so much in common in terms of our stories around burnout and alcohol. And then now we're both coaches and podcast hosts. And that was just a really fun conversation, because we talked about what we see as possible for women post-alcohol that's not possible for them when they're still drinking. So we really focused in on the transformations that we see women go through, and all the things that women are able to accomplish, and the potential that almost gets unlocked by leaving this thing behind that's not serving them anymore. And I just loved that conversation. I actually yesterday was talking to a client, and she said, we were just talking about alcohol, and she's a, successful, powerful woman. And she's decided to leave drinking behind, but it's still a struggle socially to be the one who's not drinking, no matter what your reasons are for it. But she said she was at a dinner party or something, dinner meeting one night, and there were all these like boss ass women around the table who were doing all these really cool things in business. And, she was worried about saying no to the alcohol and what people might think or whatever. And, this one woman who she really respects was incredibly successful. When the person came around and offered her wine, she was like, "Oh God, no, I don't have time for that shit." We were talking
That's
about
awesome.
how, like what a great response that is to, and so I'm going to start doing that. I think it's because that's the truth. Like, I don't have time for that. I have so many other things in my life that are so much more important to me that actually drinking makes really much more challenging. And so I just loved that response. I thought that was the greatest, you know, and when you're someone who's busy and successful and you have dreams and goals and plans and things you're working on and stuff you're excited about and kids, like I think this woman has like a bunch of kids as well. Like, you don't have time for that shit. I don't have time for that. I don't have time for hangovers. I don't have time for all the friggin'
sleepless nights,
the mental, like the mental torture of like all the thinking about whether I'm going to drink or not and whether I'm moderating effectively. I don't have time for any of that. Anyway, I loved that. Did you have any episodes that were kind of stuck out for you as favorites?
Well, I don't actually, I don't have a great memory. So,
well, you were talking about the Erica conversation.
Erica. Yeah. So the conversation with Erica, I found, I mean, I knew everything she was talking about, but the idea that so many women are still in the dark about pelvic floor physio blows my mind. Like, it's just, it should be a part of our, all of our care. You know, you should be given a pelvic floor physio the minute you get pregnant. And then from then on, it should be part of women's midlife care. And it's part of that, that prevention model that just is not part of Western medicine's approach. You know, this kind of like thinking about the future and what this might look like instead of waiting until you're, you know, how you have prolapse, or waiting until you've got sciatica like I did, or, you know, all of those things. And so I found it really helpful for a lot of women to listen to that podcast. And also I just continue to refer women constantly to pelvic floor physio. And even if you don't think you need it, I would go and get evaluated, because just to have those muscles attended to and evaluated, and all the tendons and ligaments released if there's anything that's too tight or whatever, would be really, really helpful to prevent things later on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did an episode with a guest called Jillian Fullerton, and we were talking about her experience over the last year. She's just had just an awful lot of stuff happen around her health in the last year, including a diagnosis of breast cancer and a full hysterectomy. And we were talking about how hormone therapy, HRT, is not available to her as a way to manage all of the symptoms that she's been going through around medically induced, chemo-induced menopause. And she was saying that a couple of the things that she had gotten from the podcast were that are available to her were some of the other things that we talked about, like vaginal moisturizer, which I feel like I have to mention vaginal moisturizer on the last episode, because it's been.
But is it vaginal or vaginal, Wendy?
It's vaginal, Sarah. So she was talking about the vaginal moisturizer and how she did not know that was even an option. So that is a non-hormonal treatment, and it is just that. It's a hyaluronic acid moisturizer that you can use to moisturize the tissues of the vagina and the vulva. And then she also mentioned the pelvic floor physiotherapy and how she'd gone to see a physiotherapist, and it had been absolutely wonderful experience for her. So, so that I agree. I think, so that podcast was with Erica Berger, who's a pelvic floor physiotherapist. If you want to go back and listen to it, it was fabulous. And then just all of the extraordinary, ordinary women that I've had the just absolute pleasure and gift of talking with this year on this podcast. It's so much fun to record this podcast for me. And I especially love the conversations that you and I get to have, because we often bring online the conversations that we're having offline. And every time we record one of these things, just for you listeners, we have to like cut ourselves off at the beginning so that we actually will remember to hit record, because we just start talking about all of these things. And then I'm always like trying to remember that we need to actually record something. And so at some point I say, okay, stop. I'm going to hit record now. We're going to start. So we are officially starting.
Also, every conversation we have, we say, we should put this on the podcast.
Oh yeah. And then we never remember any of the things that we say we should put on the podcast. Although there is one that I put on the list today. Sarah and I were out for dinner I don't know, when was it, Sarah, a couple of weeks ago, we were out for dinner and we were just, not talking about anything to do with work. We were just having a like fun conversation. And Sarah likes to think that she's like super chill, low maintenance person, but actually she's very high needs.
Hey, I'm not high. Hey, that's an exaggeration. I'm not very high needs. I have specific needs, but I don't impose them on other people.
Anyway, so that's her thing. So she's often talking about like food allergies, like she had to have the gluten-free crust and she can't I don't know, you can't digest like this. And then you always have to bring your own pillow with you. And what are your other things?
I have to have Bob.
She has a pillow called Bob that she brings with her, which
the body pillow.
What did Rob say about that body pillow? He said he'd rather that I actually slept with a real guy named Bob than a body pillow that looked like Bob. Poor Bob.
Bob's 20 years old. All right.
He's showing the signs of, he's been much loved. Bob has been much loved.
Okay. All of my secrets are coming out now.
Okay.
I prefer gluten-free and I have a body pillow. I'm sorry. I
just want to say though, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And then for me, I'm always like, my famous line is, I'm fine. I'm fine. So I'll tell this like really big story about like how I'm obviously not fine. And then at the end of it, I'll say, I'm fine. Don't worry. I'm fine.
Yeah.
So we were talking about how we needed to get t-shirts made up. One that's for Sarah that says, I'm low maintenance. And one for me that says, and I'm fine. We could just stand next to each other. In fact, I'm thinking I'm going to write a piece called like, I'm fine, about how, because what I've been thinking about is that I do really pride myself on being an honest person. And I talk a lot about how authenticity is such a core value of mine. And it really is. And I try to show up on this podcast and everywhere else in my life, just as myself. But I realized on reflection that I'm actually like a really good liar. And I have been lying my entire life about only one thing. And that is how I feel. And I'm just really good at lying about how I feel. And it's such a weird thing to say that out loud, as someone who really believes in following the rules and being genuine and, emotions matter and all of this stuff I talk about. I'm actually really good at not saying what I feel and saying something else. And I think that's been changing though in the last couple of years, which is why I wanted to write about it. But for years and years and years, I didn't lie about anything except for how I felt. And it's interesting to me.
I think that's pretty common.
Yeah,
for women.
me too. Yeah.
I also think that, I'm fine serves a lot of purposes.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It keeps people from asking more questions.
Yeah.
It keeps you from falling apart. In the moment, it keeps you, because who has time for that? Right.
Yeah.
It's like midlife, busy women.
Yeah.
I don't have time to fall apart in public. So don't ask me how I'm doing, because I'm just fine.
It ends a conversation. So when you're done,
it's really
and I think that's what happened with us. I think whatever I was talking about, I was like thinking to myself, I've been talking about this for too long and I actually don't want to talk. I don't want to go any further into this. So I'm just going to say I'm fine. And so we do use it as a tool, and it is definitely universal, which is why I want to write about it. Cause I try to only write about things that are interesting to other women. But that was something that, that we talked about outside of this podcast that I did remember to put on the list to bring back in. And I'm sure maybe we'll do an episode. Yeah, we might even do an episode on that topic next year.
I'm fine and I'm low maintenance.
Yeah, fine. Those might, well, you're so, I'm putting that in air quotes, low maintenance, that you probably need your own episode for that.
Probably.
Okay.
You know what? I just want to go back to the I'm fine thing, because I think it might've been a patient. I can't remember who. Somebody told me that, and this was kind of in the middle of lockdown and everything, everybody's feeling lots of feels. And she said, I don't say I'm fine anymore. I say, I have lots of feels, and I thought that was really courageous, because what it did is it did shut down the conversation in a way that I'm fine does. And then it's like, I don't, necessarily need to pursue with this particular person, the grocery clerk. I don't need to tell them how I actually am. Right. Or even a friend who you maybe don't want to get into the details with, but it acknowledges instead of I'm fine, which does not acknowledge any of the emotion, I'm feeling lots of feels or something along that line, actually acknowledges that you are feeling, that I'm having there's lots of things going on. I'm neither happy nor sad nor angry nor frustrated nor any of these things. I'm all of these things right now because all of this is going on.
Right.
And so I felt like that was a softer way to kind of use the I'm fine, but also it's more vulnerable and it's more honest.
Yeah, no, that's
really like that.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And that like ties in quite nicely to the next thing I wanted to just touch on, which is the empty nest update. Because I've been talking about that a lot in the last episode, which I know you didn't listen to, but I read a piece that I wrote about self-care, which you have actually heard. So you know which one I'm talking about. But the empty nest thing it's such a great example of something that there is no answer to that question when people ask me how I'm doing with that. I'm sure I'm still saying I'm fine sometimes, but most of the time I'm not saying that. I'm saying like, well, it kind of depends on the day, how I feel about that. Some days I'm just so excited and joyful about it for my kids. And other days I'm feeling really lonely and, anticipating the grief that's associated with that. And actually I'm writing about this right now too. And the idea that, I had this crazy thought this year, which I'm sure I've shared with you, that if I could just like learn how to be alone before they leave, that it would make it easier. And so I've been trying to practice that. And that's not really working out the way I thought it was going to work out, in that I'm pretty good by myself for a while. And then at some point it doesn't feel good to me anymore. So that didn't really help like I thought it was going to help. And then the other thing I've been trying to do is actually feel the emotion and the grief before they go, and just give myself permission and space to just be sad if I'm sad, and, cry if I'm gonna cry. And I mean, I've been crying now, like not all the time, but I've been crying a lot for the last like 12 months since I started my countdown to their leaving. And it's really not helping. I'm still sad. I'm still sad. I was writing the other day about how I got blindsided, like in front of like a stack of bananas or something in the produce aisle, like it still just comes out of left field and hits me. I don't think you can really do very much to process it before it happens. So now when people ask me, I just say, you know what, it sort of depends on the day. It's bittersweet, because it is bittersweet. It's the perfect definition of how it feels right now. So we have sold our house, which is a big deal. Because this is the house my kids have grown up in. They've been here for 14 years. They don't really remember any other homes. Well, they only had one other home in Calgary for the first 4 years of their life. Neither one of them remembers that really. So there was a lot of emotion wrapped up in that. That was a really crazy experience for me. I think I texted you that day we got the offer and I was in bed. Did I text you that day?
Yeah. Didn't you had to go to bed for the day, I think.
I had to go to bed for the afternoon. I got this insane migraine, and I had the whole day scheduled with clients, and I did my clients in the morning, and our offers were due at noon. So I was pretty good in the morning because I knew there wasn't probably going to be anything coming in till like, noon. And so I did my client work in the morning, but in, the last client that I had, it was about 11, let's say it was like 45 minutes into the session. And she said, this is a client I work with regularly. And she said, you don't look very good. I think maybe we should stop, which is crazy. That's never happened to me before in a session. But at that point, I was starting to have like that migraine aura where my vision was blurring, and I was feeling very, very sick, but I was determined to finish the client. So that was very generous of her and very insightful. And we did end up ending that session. And then I thought, well, I'll just take a break, and then I can because I had a lunch break scheduled. I thought I'll be fine for the afternoon. But I went inside, and we had received, the offer time had come in, and the realtor had forwarded us some information, and we, ended up getting this one really kind of perfect offer, which, kept us in the house until September 15th, which was my main goal in selling the house, because I wanted to have one last summer with my kids there. And it was a great offer. There was nothing wrong with it. It was by all means, this particular offer was perfect. And I just burst into tears and then continued to feel sicker and sicker and sicker. And I ended up having to cancel my clients in the afternoon, which I honestly don't think I have ever done that for an illness. Like I've done it for other things that are happening in life, but I don't think I've ever done it because I'm sick. Like it took me hours to feel better. But what was really interesting about it, and I am writing, there's a chapter that's called Emptying the Nest that I'm working on right now. But when I wrote about this, what was really interesting is that when I just allowed myself to lie in bed in the dark and actually feel what I was feeling, which was really just an incredible amount of relief and grief at the same time. There should be a word for that. Like,
yeah.
Regrief. It was like regrief, right? Yeah. And I was feeling it. And then I just cried, and I cried for a long time. Kind of quietly up there. I just cried. And then I had a bath and I felt a lot better, just like actually processing and allowing myself to feel that emotion. So anyway, that's still all of that emptying the nest thing. It's still a work in progress. I'll keep everybody updated. I'll probably do an episode on empty nesting in the fall when I am an actual empty nester. I am not yet. And then I guess, Sarah, the other thing we wanted to just touch on, we want to touch on one thing, which is a menopause and hormone update for both of us. I've got nothing to say on that, except that things are going really, really well. And I'm very happy where I am. And I feel like I finally kind of found my stride, and I feel much more grounded, and I'm just really enjoying this side of it, which is for me mostly showing up in a newfound kind of sense of confidence and in some clarity around who I am, which is great. What's been happening with you on that side of things?
Well, I've been struggling more than I thought I would. It's so interesting because it makes me think about my pregnancies where I was extraordinarily ill for both of them. Like, I mean, not hospitalized, but close in terms of nausea. And it annoyed me so much that I was, kind of a hormone expert, and I was, a naturopath. I did all the right things. I took all the right supplements. I did all the things, and blindsided by extreme nausea. And so here in menopause, I'm being really challenged with, which is probably good for my patients, because I'm going through all these different iterations of what this looks like. But it's not good for me in the middle of the night having hot flashes. So I'm now, beforehand, I was having trouble with, when I started the hormones, it was having trouble with some breast tenderness and some fibrosis that I've had, my whole life, that they used to get really tender before my period. And now the hormones had been making them tender. And then I do exactly what I've done with pretty much everything in my life in terms of self-care, which is do it for a while and then just, it's not working. And I get freaked out. And meanwhile, as you say, I'm, counseling you to stay the course, be patient, you're going to feel better. And I'm like on and off the hormones, just like,
I know, I feel like I've become Sarah's naturopath.
Yeah, totally.
Like absolutely no training skills or anything, because I'm constantly like, what do you mean you went off it again?
I know. Well, it's like the character flaw. Yeah. So I just get too in my head, and I'm like, and I just try and figure it out from a different perspective. And then, anyways, it's the impatience has not been helpful, because I have gone on and off of them. And so what I finally did is I got another prescription, and I'm now sticking to it. And what I'm noticing is I think going on and off it has helped, because it's sort of sensitized the receptors a little bit. So I'm now not having as strong a reaction to the estrogen. The progesterone doesn't affect me really anymore, like in a negative way, but the estrogen was affecting me, giving me this breast tenderness. And so I think I'm on my on my way. Okay. What finally got me over the hump was the fact that it was starting to get hot. It started to get warm here. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot do the summer feeling like this, because I'm pretty tolerant about, I mean, I know you think
low
I'm high
maintenance, you guys.
I'm
She's
low
so low
maintenance.
maintenance.
So low maintenance about the hot flash. Like, I sit in my office. I'm lucky. I'm not sitting in a boardroom with a bunch of men. I have a hot flash in my office. I just take my sweater off, turn the fan on, and usually my patient's also having a hot flash. So it's, it's not a big deal. But it was the nights that were starting to get to me. And so I am still working with that, and still amazed at the state of my system, and how sensitive it is at times, and then how insensitive it is at other times, and just trying to figure it out, and just really, it's hitting home again for patients how this is such it's a process. And some people go right on the hormones, or they go on not even hormones, they go on herbs that I'll give them, whatever, they feel great almost instantaneously.
And some women don't feel any of these things and just go through menopause, and
they
it's
don't need it.
They didn't even know they went through menopause.
Absolutely.
So I think it's important to just emphasize that. Like, Sarah and I have had, in some ways, somewhat similar experiences with this, but also very, very different. And we're just two women, and the way that we're dealing with it, and the things we're trying, or the things that are a good fit for us and work for us that are not maybe a great fit for other people. Like, it's
not for everyone.
Exactly. And it did take me a long time. Same thing. I mean, I was in the throes of these symptoms, I think, before Sarah was, like, in terms of how awful they were and how drastic they were. It took a while for me to get it to settle out. Today, funny story, today, when we were talking about I asked Sarah what we should put on the agenda for today. And she said, maybe we should just schedule a hot flash for me. And then it ended up happening before we actually hit record. I'm sure another one will happen at some point, but her sweater's off now, so we might be safe.
I think it hit home that you were starting to become my naturopath when your son brought us blizzards one night.
Oh yeah.
Right. We were like, I don't know what we'd had for dinner, but all of a sudden you were just like, you've never had a score blizzard? What are you talking about? And so you ordered up 2 blizzards and sent your son to go get them. And so I was like enjoying my score blizzard, which I had never had a score blizzard.
And it's the best bad thing out there.
But it was like 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Timing wasn't great.
It was way more sugar than I would normally have in a day. And I was like, I'm pretty red right now because I just had a hot flash, but I was scarlet and basically had all my clothes off. And Wendy was like, what's going on? Why are you not taking your hormones? Because Wendy's sitting there eating her blizzard and not having a hot flash at all. And meanwhile, the naturopath who prescribed her hormones is like whipping her clothes off and having this wicked hot flash from all this sugar.
2 summers ago, that was me. Like 2 summers ago, I would eat like a square of chocolate and have a hot flash, just a tiny square of dark chocolate, and I'd have a hot flash. And just for everyone listening, I do not have blizzards very often at 10 p.m. I think that's the first blizzards I'd had in like probably 7 years, but I just thought it was such a shame because at least I knew what I was missing, but Sarah didn't even know what she was missing. So I felt like she had to experience that. So anyway, it was worth it. We decided it was worth the hot flash, but it was a monumental hot flash.
Yeah.
So that's the update on the menopause stuff. And then the last thing that we wanted to talk about, which I think is the most important thing, is and I've already talked a lot about this, so I don't have to talk about my own thing on this, but I wanted to bring you on so that you could talk about what's going on in your life in terms of this thing that the two of us have just started getting really clear on in the last year, I think, on our own, but also together in our conversations. And it's definitely tied to, for us, the shift into menopause, but just this idea of like, okay, wait, hold on. Like, we get to change this if it doesn't feel like it's the right thing, or there's something more that we need to be doing or that we want in our lives. And I think, as I said, I don't need to talk anymore about how I'm working on doing that, but you've been doing some cool stuff lately. And I wanted to give you a chance to update people on what's going on in life in terms of this topic.
Yeah. Let's see. I think the 2 main things are that I did the first introduction to the coaching course that you did through Coactive. I did that when my kids went to Edmonton last week. I had 6 days without children, which I know I don't quite have empty nest because I couldn't wait for them to get on that plane. Mind you, I burst into tears as soon as they got on the plane, but the idea that I hadn't had any space to myself for that long, and for my husband and I to actually have that kind of like just relaxed space where there were no children to attend to. So during that time, I took advantage of a 4-day introduction to coaching course, and really kind of looking at I just wanted to see if it landed, really, just to see, like, I'm going to be working for what am I? I'll be 53 next week. I'm going to be working for another at least 10 years.
Mhm.
And so I just need to know what that looks like, because doing exactly the same thing. I mean, I tried to write a book that served a lot of purposes, but it didn't really, light me up the way that I thought it would after I got a certain, I got so far on it. And then I've just kind of been dabbling in things, and I just wanted to see if this felt right. And really within half an hour, I knew. It
was so cool, you guys.
It was just
it's a coactive coaching model through the Coactive Coach Training Institute. And it's the one that I did, the one that I did in between my first certification around natural nutrition and this Naked Mind certification. And it's really a generalized life coaching model that you can apply in so many different contexts. Yeah. And I use it in my coaching now. Of course, it's the foundation of my coaching. And I bring in all the other, modalities that I'm certified and trained in as well, but it's really the foundation. And the thing I love the most about it is that the underlying philosophy of this coaching approach is that everybody is resourceful, creative, and whole. So every human who comes into my practice and into my life is already whole. They're not broken. They're not missing something. They're not flawed or defective. They're creative, resourceful, and whole. And the reason why that matters is, from that place, if that's the base assumption when you're working with someone, then that leads to naturally to a place where it's like, well, of course, I'm not the one to give you the answers or the advice. You already have all of that inside of you. Let me help you through carefully crafted questions and exercises. Let me help you get clear on what you already know. And let me help you get, moving on the steps that you already know are the perfect right next steps for you. And so I love that about it. And Sarah sent me a text like, you were not very far into this course. And I got a text from her. She's like, oh my God, I love this. I love it. Which felt great.
It just, it appeals to the part of my practice that I love the most, that I actually get most excited about talking to women about. And this is the part that makes me, I'm rarely late in my appointments. I'm pretty good with time management, but that's the part that makes me late, is that I get all, charged up about the idea that this is a big, big, big time in women's lives. Perimenopause and menopause, there's so much potential. There's so much possibility. And there's so much opportunity to choose what the next part of your life looks like. And I feel like that's what I'm doing right now. And that's what I actually want to support women through. If I had to take the part that is the most exciting. So I'm really, trying to do exactly what we've talked about, which is like, what is working for you? What is not working for you? What does, how can you do more of the things that do feel like they light you up? And how can you, how can I also sort of find those things? So this is like a little bit of experimentation, just like trying various things and going in it wholeheartedly and just saying, this is just an experiment. I'm just like, I paid for the course. I'm doing the course. I don't have to do this for the rest of my life. I just take the course and see if it lights me up. And so that was super, super exciting. My husband, and I think you kept asking me if I was tired. I was like, no. And I had dropped my kids off at the airport at like 5 o'clock that morning. And I was like, I'm not tired. I'm not tired. I'm excited. I'm energized. I was tired at the end of it, but it didn't feel, there was nothing about it that felt draining. And I felt like I could actually use my brain. And it felt like learning something new for the first time in a long time. So that's
great.
really cool.
Yeah. And are you going to take another one?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out where in my schedule it fits, because it was really helpful to not have the kids there, frankly. So I'll probably come to the Cove and do it there next time.
Sarah's gonna come up and do her second module and I'll just be doing my thing somewhere else, and she'll be doing her module with no teenagers or kids wandering around.
That's right. And so then the other thing that I've really been focusing on is, like, my history with going to the gym has been really peppered, because I've always been someone who's gone into it with this all or nothing attitude. And I've really tried to break it. And my whole family's like this, where it's pathological. And so we call it Baileying it, which we could just Bailey just about anything, which is, when you just kind of like go into it full force. And unfortunately for me, what that's meant for the last 10 years is probably like 6 or 7 different injuries. And therefore, work out for 6 months, get an injury, and then spend 2 years recovering from it. And so it hasn't really served, this hasn't served me, in case you haven't figured that out. But I've known that intellectually for a long time, but I've never really been able to enact it. And there's something about this time in my life where I feel like I don't have to apologize for anything, that has changed my relationship with the gym. So I've gone back to a gym that I tried beforehand, where the trainer there had, I had injured myself. And so 3 years later, I went back and I said, okay, so I want to be treated like I'm 90. I'm not kidding. Like I need to help myself, and you also need to help me, just not push it, and to understand that if I say no, it's taking a lot out of me to say no, but that I really actually mean it. So, when I can't put this arm back because I have a shoulder injury, I don't want to push it this time. Whereas every single other time in my life, I've pushed it, and then just ended up hundreds of dollars later in osteopathy and many years of pain, not being able to follow through. But this time, I really feel that there's just been a shift. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care that I can't do this. That's okay. I can't do this. And I just move on. And they find an accommodation for me, and I just move on. And the result of that is that the injuries are healing, because I'm getting stronger.
And you can keep going.
And I can keep going, and I'm excited to go, because I'm not pushing myself to the point where I leave feeling horrible. And if I do push it and I come back and say, I can't do that thing I did last time because, it flares up this thing. They're like, all right, that's fine. And so now, instead of feeling 90, I feel 80. I said, I'm just going to keep taking years off. Yeah. And as I get stronger, and then, hopefully I'll get to where I am now. But I know it seems like it's a no-brainer, it just seems obvious, but there's something about being in that menopausal place where it filters into everything, where you're just like, I don't care anymore. I just don't care. I don't have to compete with myself. I don't have to compete with any of the other people at this gym. And that's sort of gone. It's like, there's just more sort of, yep, I'm all right with this. That's fine. If this takes me 5 years to get to 50 in terms of how I feel, in terms of strength, to repair what I've done to myself over the last 10 years with this kind of with this mindset of just pushing through. Like, I'm just not going to push through anymore.
Yeah, I think it's you mentioned that to me, and I wanted you to talk about it today, because I think this is a common thing that women do. And I just had been reflecting on this with a client earlier this week, this idea of for how, like, 20 years of my life, I ran. And it was one of those things I did that became who I was, which is just a terrible way to define who you are. But, I was a lawyer, I was a mother, I was a runner. Right. And I ran for 20 years, and there was always some race coming up. There was a half marathon, there was a 10K, there was a full marathon, there were, all of these things. And I just was having this conversation with this client who is a running person, not a runner, who is a running woman, a woman who runs, and she really loves it. And I was saying, it's so great. I'm so glad you love it. I cannot remember one time being out for a run and thinking to myself, this feels good. You know, I liked the feeling when I got back from runs, obviously, and the feeling of accomplishing, you know, distances was, I guess, some meaningful for me, but I did not enjoy the act of running. And what I've realized, this ties in nicely to the very last thing I want to talk about, which is this definition of the meaning of life that I heard a couple months ago and I cannot remember who said it. I can't attribute it to the person. I wish I could. Very simple answer was given to the question, what do you think the meaning of life is? And this person said, I think the meaning of life is learning how to enjoy the passage of time. And I love that because it's exactly what you and I talk about all the time on this podcast. It's what I talk about with my clients that is the lesson that I've learned in the last 5 years or so of living and doing all the work that I've done, including, you know, giving up alcohol and trying to find more of the things that were missing in my life, identify what those are and set better boundaries and say no more often and all of that. It's all about enjoying the passage of time. And when I look back on running as just one example of something I did a lot, I did not enjoy the passage of that time at all. I was doing it because I think there's a social norm out there around what exercise should look like for women and what self-care should look like for women. And by the way, one more time, let me just do a little raging. Who is it that's creating that standard of self-care and that idea? It's freaking patriarchy, you guys. It's not women.
Yeah, like, totally.
Does it actually serve you? Are you actually enjoying the way you are passing your time? If you're not, then say so and make a change, because you get to decide what you spend your time doing. And if it's not joyful at all, it's probably not the right thing. And when it comes to exercise, one thing I've learned and that Sarah's learning now is that there is a way to enjoy the passage of time when you're exercising. There is a way to make it really feel great and be something that is sustainable for you. And the way to do that is to find something that brings you joy, to know your own limits and boundaries, to listen to your body, and to actually stand up for yourself. And I am that person, Sarah, who there's always an accommodation happening for me at the gym constantly. I mean, I ride the bike instead of rowing. And I've done that for the last 2 years at the gym I go to, because rowing is terrible for the neck injury that I have. And there was a little bit of sort of encouragement to just learn how to actually row and to do it. And I said, no, I am not going to do this. Every time I do it, I don't sleep for nights and nights and nights, and it leads to this. So it's not worth it to me. So I figured out how to ride the bike in a way that feels really great and is really friggin' challenging and hard. And I love it. I'm also, just yesterday, was at the gym doing push-ups, and I can't fold my wrist for a push-up. I have one wrist that's really, really sore. So I always do push-ups on dumbbells. You know, I change all the exercises, and I don't care if I'm the only person doing that, which, by the way, I'm not. At this gym I go to is great, and I am not. They're really great at accommodating. And so I am definitely not, but I've learned that. And I don't think I'm ever going to run again for, air quotes, pleasure.
Right.
Because I mean, unless I'm being chased by a bear, it's just not something I'm going to do. I think I have gotten really, really clear on that. So that's been one of the gifts, I think, of menopause for me. So on that note, my friend, Sarah and I are going to go away and have a great summer and spend lots of time together, although she's mad at me because I'm moving, I'm moving a little further away from her, but she will make the trek, and we will be back in the fall with some updates on the best trash TV we watched this summer, and how our respective summers went. And by the time I come back and see you, will officially be an empty nester. My daughter will be at the University of Ottawa and my son will be at Acadia. And I'm excited for both of them, but there will definitely be some grief. More grief to come, more crying in the grocery store. If you see me crying in the grocery store, just give me a little pat and walk on. I'm sure it's going to happen again. Anyway, Sarah, thanks again for just being such an amazing guest and for coming and coming on so regularly and having these conversations that I think really matter to women about what's going on in our lives and that is also going on in all of their lives. I appreciate you. And I'm so happy I asked you to be a guest on that very first episode of season 1, because from that, not only have we had so many other great episodes, but we have developed this really, really important, special friendship. So
yeah,
thank you. And
thank you.
And I will see you back here next season. Hi. Thanks everyone for listening. We appreciate all of you. Have a great summer.
Bye.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a burnout and balance coach, I help busy high achievers like you create a more balanced, joyful life. Ready to create a life you don't want to escape from? Download your free Blueprint for Change now. This incredible workbook includes some of my favorite coaching tools and will help you get clear on what you need more and less of in your life. Grab it at www.wendymccallum.com/blueprint. That's www.wendymccallum.com/blueprint.